Hello, I'm Jeff Streicher. I'm a curator at the herpetology group here at the Natural History Museum in London. And today I'm joined by my colleague,
Brennan. I'm a research fellow at the Natural History Museum.
and today we're going to be answering your questions about snakes. So should we just get this started?
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay, here we go.
Herpetologists answer your questions about snakes with Jeff Streicher and Brennan.
So first one that we've been given is,
Jeff looks at a laptop.
I want to make sure my delivery's right. What is the world's most venomous snake?
It's a good one. I'm going to say inland taipan from Australia.
Right, yeah.
Definitely most potent venom.
Well, I think that's definitely a contender, and I think you'd know, given your experience doing work in Australia. I think if we go elsewhere in the world, some of the other snakes that come to mind might be the tiger rattlesnake would be one that's got kind of a mix of neurotoxic and hemotoxic venoms. And then also some sea snakes that we were actually talking about those earlier today, but they're quite venomous as well.
Yeah. Really rare bites on humans, but super potent venom. Yeah.
The caveat I'll add is that it kind of depends because different snake species have different types of venoms that are really effective depending on what their prey or predators are. So some snakes might be really dangerous for fish, but then not dangerous for mammals, and then vice versa for other species. So I guess the real answer to the question is it's complicated.
Inland taipan. Anyway.
Are there any dangerous snake species in Africa? There are absolutely venomous snake species in Africa, and there are some that are, if we're defining dangerous as potentially harmful to people, there are quite a few species found in Africa. That includes things like the boomslang. There are a couple of different vipers, including the Gaboon viper, and also there are some there are adder species there that are quite dangerous, and also some cobras as well that are found throughout most of Africa. So, short answer to this question: yes, there are dangerous snakes in Africa.
There's also some big pythons that I wouldn't want to tangle with as well.
Oh, right.
In addition to the venomous ones. Yeah.
Good point.
What's the difference between poison and venom? This is one that comes up a lot and people like to be pedantic about, I guess. But usually the explanation is that poison is something that's ingested. So you have like a poison dart frog where you have to, say, bite the animal to get that toxin. Whereas venom is used as like an injected substance, like in a bee sting or wasp sting or snake venom. But people use the terms kind of a bit interchangeably, whether or not that's correct.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting because when people think of snakes, when we talk about toxins, we're mostly talking about venomous snakes. But then there are also some snakes like there's a snake genus called Rhabdophis where they actually sequester toxins from the food they eat into the tissues in their skin, and that makes them poisonous to their to their potential prey.
It's like if you ate too much
predators.
McDonald's and all of a sudden you were exuding some sort of poison from cheeseburgers. Anyway, being both poisonous and venomous seems like a bit of overkill.
But there are
cool.
it's under your definition. Snakes kind of do both, which really highlights how incredible they are.
Yeah.
Jeff scrolls.
All right, let's go on to the next one here. Whoa, what is the biggest snake species that ever lived?
Whoa.
That's a big question. But I guess I'll take this question then. The biggest snake species that ever lived is actually not living at the moment. It's a fossil snake that lived in what's now Colombia, and the scientists have called it Titanoboa. There's also another fossil snake that might be a contender for the title of world's biggest snake. It's called Gigantophis. What an interesting name. But it's a bit difficult to say exactly what the biggest snake species that ever lived is because like a lot of fossils, we really only have one or two examples from different individuals, so it's hard for paleontologists to know exactly what the maximum size of these different species are. But at the moment, I'm pretty sure the largest snake that ever lived is still Titanoboa, as far as we know.
There's a lot of big fossil species, like big extinct snakes.
Yeah.
We need more big. Bring back the big snakes.
Yeah. Any to add to the list?
Yeah, Wanambi in Australia was a huge, like, there's pythons and stuff in Australia now, but before pythons, there were these this other group of snakes, and Wanambi was this huge, giant snake that would have lived in Australia.
Wow, I didn't know that.
As well, yeah.
Cool. Right. So maybe I'll take advantage of the more like worms. But, no, I can see the vertebrae.
Yeah, they've
That's
got like a diamondback. They're like rattlesnakes.
Oh yeah, definitely see that.
Jeff picks up a snake gummy from a plate on the table and eats it.
Cool. So the next question's brought up here.
What's the biggest animal an anaconda can swallow whole? Yeah, wow. Ooh. Well, I'm not going to answer for an anaconda, but at the Bronx Zoo in New York, there used to be a reticulated python, which is also an enormous snake, arguably the second biggest snake in the world, or first. And they used to feed this reticulated python named Samantha whole pigs.
Really?
Yeah, it was like once every couple months, and they were enormous. It was huge. There's videos I think or photos you can see of.
Wow.
But anacondas eat things like, natively they would eat things like capybaras, which are like enormous guinea pigs that would be, 50 kilos or so. Or
I
more.
think they'll also, because they live in a lot of kind of very marshy, river-adjacent habitats in South America. The other large prey item that I've heard of them taking is these black caiman, which is a crocodilian. They can be quite large. I think they can exceed something ridiculous like 15 meters. Are we going to be able to fact check that? I really just kind of pulled that out. I'm not sure. Sometimes they're just, the facts are there and then we need to double check them because that's good science.
Jeff means 15 feet, not 15 meters.
Because 15 meters sounds really
Yeah,
big.
humans make mistakes. All right. So are we happy with that answer?
Yeah. How did snakes get so small when they used to be so big? Okay, so Jeff and I both work in evolutionary biology. And so what we do a lot of the time is talk about how animals ended up looking the way they are. And through evolution, we have pressures that force a species down a path. So we might have a really big snake, but if it's only eating very small prey items over millions of years, small changes accumulate, and these species only require smaller and smaller items of prey, and it might end up with a species that has evolved to be much smaller than it used to be. These changes happen on really, really long timescales, millions of years or tens of millions of years. But with this question, I'm not exactly sure. The idea, the ancestral snakes that we know, they diverged from lizards, snakes are a type of legless lizard, were actually quite small. They weren't very big. So snakes probably started quite small, and things like anacondas and reticulated pythons have gotten really big on the other kind of extreme.
Yeah, definitely. So I think like the one way to answer this question is certain lineages or certain evolutionary branches of snakes became very big, but snakes weren't always big before and now they're small. So the answer is that snake evolution is dynamic. So several species have evolved large body sizes. And in terms of why we don't have Titanoboa around today, maybe there are some parallels to why we don't have giant dragonflies flying around.
Yeah.
There could environmental conditions in the past were quite different, and so that kind of changes the constraints that different species have in terms of whether they can survive or not with a giant body size.
Yeah, or like megalodon or something.
Yeah,
where,
right.
Big predators sometimes disappeared because of their prey items disappeared as well.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah. That feels like a pretty solid, thorough answer to that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Probably more than people want.
Yeah, all right. What is the most deadliest snake in the world, and how big does it get? It's okay.
You
Repackaging's
pick your
good.
favorite
Rebranding.
most
Okay.
deadly, and I'll pick my favorite
Yeah.
most deadly, and then we'll say how big they get.
Yeah. What is the most deadliest snake in the world, and how big does it get? A lot of time when scientists don't have an answer for something, they read the question again slowly. So that's just a little insider information for you. I'm going to go with...
Jeff thinking and strokes his chin. Ian glances at him expectantly.
I'm gonna go with the gaboon viper. in
Gaboon
Africa.
viper, okay. It's a good one.
And I like that one because it is dangerous, and it's got, as far as we know, the largest fangs of any venomous snake living at the moment.
I'm going to go with Russell's viper. I think Russell's viper is actually the most deadly in that it kills more people than any other snake species.
Of course, you have to use traditional definitions.
Traditionalist. I'm objective as a scientist. How big? 1.5 meters?
Yeah.
Maybe?
So the one I picked is substantially larger at, I think almost, they can get up 2 meters, something
Yeah,
like that,
and
right?
chunky.
Yeah, and they're quite massive. Yeah, they get quite large, quite heavy.
Thick.
So yeah, I guess again, this is the answer is really based on your opinion.
Why don't snakes have legs?
This is a great question.
Jeff, go on.
Right. So this is actually something I have to address, which is I don't want to blow anyone's minds, but some snakes technically do have legs. What? And I'm not talking about a fossil snake or a controversial fossil snake that's got some clear leg bones, but several families of snakes, including the boas and pythons, actually have remnants of their pelvic girdle and some vestigial bits of the limbs that they used to have. So saying that a snake doesn't have legs is not entirely accurate because they do technically still have remnants of legs in the bones that we use to define legs. But generally speaking, why did snakes evolve to be limbless? I think my answer to that question would be that there are a lot of benefits to being able to move through certain substrates or substances if you don't have limbs, things like loose sand and soil, water, and that might be one reason that you do away with limbs. And some of the evidence we have to support that is that other relatives of snakes, so the group that Ian mentioned earlier, squamate reptiles, we'd see that it's not just snakes that have lost their limbs. A lot of other lizards have actually lost their limbs, and some we think are in the process of losing limbs or show variation in what types of limbs they develop. So that's kind of a rambling answer to the question that it's probably related to environment. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's a lot of ink has been spilled on this idea of why snakes lost their limbs, but I think Jeff probably summed it up pretty well. What causes reptile skin to be more porous?
I'll let you take that
I'm
one.
not sure about the question here. Yeah. More porous than what is a bit of a dangling question. It's actually less porous than pretty much anybody else's skin. Reptiles are really what we say is they're desiccation tolerant in that they don't lose much moisture through their skin. Mammals like us, we perspire to cool down, and we let out sweat through our skin to help cool us off. Reptiles don't do that. Their skin is actually really sealed. The scales are very good at not losing moisture, which means they don't drink much or often, especially compared to things like frogs or salamanders, which are really, really porous.
Yeah. That's also one of the, I remember reading some papers on sea snakes, and obviously drinking salt water is not great if you're a vertebrate animal. And so they rarely drink, but when they do, they wind up drinking when it rains off this lens of fresh water that forms on the surface. Amazing. But potentially, as you were just saying, that's one reason snakes, unlike a lot of other reptiles, have been effective at colonizing marine environments because they maybe don't need water quite as much.
And deserts.
Yeah,
reptiles
absolutely.
are like, you can look across the world and in places, in deserts like in Africa and Australia and South America, they'll be really species poor for mammals or birds or whatever, or amphibians. But there'll be plenty of reptiles, and that's because they do well without water. Yeah. Because their skin isn't porous.
Yeah. So, I guess the answer to the question is...
No.
It isn't porous, relatively speaking. That was good. I like that.
Jeff scrolls on the laptop.
Oh, this is a good question. Okay. What makes snakes move?
No, sorry. What makes snake to move?
Yeah. So, snakes. Yeah. What's making snakes move?
Yeah. Really good question. I'm going to let Jeff handle this first.
Thanks for that, Ian. We often file this under a category of biology called locomotor performance, how snakes move. They don't have limbs, as we've already covered earlier. So how do they get around their environments despite not having limbs? Well, they actually have very special scales on their stomachs. Their ventral scales actually allow them to get some grip, and so as long as there's something for them to grasp onto in a complex surface, they can use those to move themselves forward. Scientists have come up with a couple different words to describe different types of snake motion. I won't bore you with them here, but they kind of involve different types of movement snakes can do. So I mentioned one of them about grasping with their ventral scales. They also essentially are a giant muscle. What runs along the vertebral column of the snake are two really strong muscles, and those allow them to coil very strongly. That's a lot of snakes eat via something called constriction, so they'll actually squeeze their prey. You've probably heard of that before. But these also can be very helpful for moving around their environments, including climbing up poles. They can do I will drop one of the terms. Is that called concertina?
Concertina, yeah.
When this is where someone that had a live snake would show you on a pole it climbing up. So you just have to imagine the snake climbing up a pole. But essentially these muscles are very strong and can help them move around their environments. A lot of snakes are incredibly fast, and it's amazing that given that they don't have limbs, they can be so quick. They also, we mentioned sea snakes a couple of times so far. They also are very good swimmers, and I think even snakes that rarely, if ever, go in water can still swim based on...
I think they can all swim.
Yeah, so we know generally speaking that snakes are really great swimmers too, but the key to this is a combination of their scales and their muscles.
Only thing I'm going to add is there's some really famous ways that snakes move, like sidewinding.
Right.
So sidewinding snakes in North
I'm really
America.
glad you're here. I can't believe I forgot that.
And Africa, that literally they send their squiggles sideways to move across loose sand and stuff, which is a really, really cool way of moving around. But I think probably the most important thing that Jeff mentioned is those scales on the belly and how they're just a muscle rope. What snakes are like. They're just super duper strong. And the pole climbing, incredible. Like they can climbing up trees. Okay, there's rough bark, but there's in Guam there's these invasive brown tree snakes, and they were like, we can protect these birds living in these nests by just putting the nest boxes on top of a real slippery pole. And the snakes were like, we got a new one for you. We're gonna literally tie ourselves in a little knot around the pole and shimmy up. And they move in many different ways.
Yeah. So snakes can climb a greased pole.
Yeah.
Also something you now know. And you know what? I don't mean to go on too long with this question, but I just read yesterday they've described a new snake locomotor behavior.
Cool.
Snakes also cartwheel.
Ian silently chuckles.
There's a snake that does a cartwheeling behavior.
That's
in
amazing
Southeast Asia.
because there's an urban myth in Australia of the hoop snake.
That
the snake, bites its own tail and chases.
That's crazy.
I don't know if I believe you.
I'll show you when we get back to the lab. But the hoop thing, I think that's in many places in the world, because in North America, they're also, for this species Masticophis, the coach whip snake, I've heard a couple of places in Texas people say, they'll bite their tail. And, I mean, that's not what the snake we were talking about does, but it does do a sort of cartwheel like that.
Watch out for them hoop snakes.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to move on to the next question.
Yeah, let's get out of here. Do pythons live inside water? Like with a lot of big animals, whales and hippos and things, water can be a really good environment to support big animals. So you find things like anacondas in South America have moved into water because it's a good way to get around, but also it's a good way to hide a really big body. There's pythons. There's literally a species called the water python in New Guinea and Northern Africa. Pythons live in water.
Ian shrugs.
Yeah,
some of them.
I'm happy with
not
that.
all of them.
Great answer. Okay, this next one coming up. And 3, 2, question.
What is the most beautiful snake in the world? I love this question.
That's a fantastic question, whoever submitted that.
Oh, man.
And of course, this is a subjective answer. But I'm going to pick as the most beautiful snake in the world. I mean, A lot of people are going to associate things like particularly colorful snakes with beauty, things like that. But I think the most beautiful snake in the world is something called the tentacled snake, which has very unique structures on its face that it uses to sense its environment. There are also really brightly colored, beautiful snakes. What's your
Yeah, I'm
favorite?
going to be traditionalist here. I'm going to
course he
say
is.
rainbow snakes in South America, not the American ones, rainbow boas. They can be orange and
Epicrates,
red.
is
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
epicrates, yeah. And they, not only are they beautiful color, but they also have really iridescent scales. So they can be, you get this shimmer of blues and greens and amazing kind of rainbow colors off their scales. So traditional, non-traditional, it's just how it goes.
Yeah. What is the name of the biggest and longest snake in the world recently?
Jeff raises his eyebrows.
I don't know if I feel qualified to answer this.
Their name was Lisa. Biggest and longest snake in the world. Longest snake is pretty generally accepted as a reticulated python. This is a snake that gets really, really big, maybe up to 9 meters long, I think. I think there's been a long-standing thing out from National Geographic that if anybody can prove of a snake that's over 10 meters long, that they win X amount of money or something. But reticulated pythons in Southeast Asia are definitely longest snakes in the world. They get really, really big.
The biggest sometimes can also be defined by the heaviest, and at least last I heard, the record of an anaconda was holding that for having the most mass, being the heaviest. Yeah. Here at the Natural History Museum, we have some snake skins of these large python species that Ian was mentioning that do approach 10 meters in length, but these are not recently collected. These were collected in like Victorian times, so does not really help with this question. Just another fact.
Yeah,
We'd like to give those out.
You also get the problem that skins of things can get stretched really easily, so they end up being longer than the animal actually was in life.
That's a good point. I was just trying to make it sound impressive. Fair
That's
enough.
why you end up with these enormous skins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, good question. How dangerous is a black mamba to a diamondback? I assume they mean a diamondback rattlesnake.
No.
Black mambas are an African species. They're found in southern Africa. Diamondback rattlesnakes are a North American species found in southwest U.S. and Mexico, and southeast U.S. So technically not dangerous at all to each other because they'd never really meet one another unless, one got on a plane to pick some beef.
Yeah.
But figuratively, go on.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about, so snakes do often eat each other. In fact, the world's largest venomous snake, the king cobra, its scientific name more or less means snake eater, the genus name. So we do know that venomous snakes can actually eat other venomous snakes, and they do. As Ian highlighted, this would be very rare for these two snakes to encounter one another. But there are a couple of things going on. So both of these are venomous snake species. So if I had to imagine this in my mind, I'd want to know about the composition of the venom and whether or not each species had a susceptibility to that venom. So you can imagine that, if a diamondback rattlesnake bit another diamondback rattlesnake, particularly if it came from the same place of the diamondback rattlesnake that was doing the biting, probably there would be little effect of the venom because the snakes have to have a natural immunity to these toxic proteins that they're producing. So I'd want to know that. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm terribly sorry for being unprepared to answer this question, but that would give us a possible answer to whether or not the venom would subdue either of the species. In terms of size, the diamondback rattlesnake, I think they're more massive. They get heavier, and at least so there are a couple species of diamondback rattlesnake, and the largest one, which I think is the eastern diamondback, Adamantius, right? That would be quite a bit larger. Although mambas get quite long, they're very skinny. So that might, if you're thinking about mass going up, if they're just kind of like mamba versus rattlesnake kind of thing. The diamondback's got the the mass going on there. But the mamba's pretty fast and can probably run away. So I guess I guess this is all building up to me going rattlesnake.
I was gonna say mamba. I think they're built to be fast. They're active predators that move around a lot. I think it would have the advantage.
Yeah, but the rattlesnake also has a evolutionarily novel organ at the end of its tail called a rattle, right? Which it can use to distract the mamba.
It could.
Are you really going to put this out there?
Yeah, this is damaging our careers.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa!
That's yours, Ian.
How do snakes mate? This is a really cool question. Hopefully we won't spend too much time on this. But snakes, well, the first step is that snakes' organs for mating, their sexual organs, are inside the body. And they have a shared opening called a cloaca. So wees and poos would come out of the same opening.
Multi-purpose.
Multi-purpose. But male snakes have an organ called a hemipenis. And this hemipenis is held inside the body. Imagine like a glove. It's inside out, inside the body. And when it gets activated, they push it out and it pops out inside out and it's fluid filled. And it's bilobed. That's why it's called a hemipene. So it's got two sides, which means that the male snake can now approach the female snake from either side. Because he doesn't have legs or arms or anything to hold on, he's at a disadvantage trying to kind of gain purchase and find the right spot. So having this kind of benefit of two organs means lining up on either side isn't a problem. Once that happens, the actual hemipene can sometimes be covered in these kind of spines or spikes. So once he's able to engage with the female, those spines or spikes can hold him in place in case another male comes along to try and push him off, or the female starts kind of moving to a safer place, like, you know, under a rock ledge or something. It's a complicated process. It can take a long time. They can kind of link together for hours at a time. But there is a lot of buildup to this.
Yeah, and then that being locked in place is quite important because a lot of snake species have male-male combat.
Yeah.
So that, like Ben, that includes the adders we were seeing earlier this week. That you'll often see them in at least in the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, where you've got extreme weather changes throughout the year. In the springtime, you'll see some male snakes kind of winding up on one another like this. So yeah, like once they're in place, that staying in place can be very important.
Yeah. In like Jeff is saying, in a lot of these areas where snakes come out of hibernation or whatever, often the males come out first. They warm up, they get themselves ready, and when a female emerges, it's like a wrestling battle to be the first one to get there. Yeah. The females are generally often larger, and yeah, it can be a real scramble. There's some great videos of garter snakes in North America doing this.
Imagine. Yeah. So now you know a little bit more about how snakes mate.
I think this is our last question.
Okay.
But what is the color of a snake's poop?
Ian looks at Jeff.
It's a great way to end this segment.
It is. The tail end.
Do you want to have a first go at that?
Yeah, sure. Snakes poop and we together. So, in a single snake poop, you're going to get a turd, like a brown turd, as well as a white kind of substance that's called urates. Yeah. And this is the urine in a solid form instead of in a liquid form, like the way we excrete waste. Yeah.
So it tends to be brown, blackish, and white, more or less. It's two-colored, yeah.
Yeah,
two-toned.
Two-toned.
Yeah. And I always think it's interesting that I think most snakes that eat vertebrates, they digest all of the bones, right? So you very rarely, like in a lot of animals, you see like undigestible bits, and in snakes, their poop normally is very uniform.
Yeah. It doesn't look particularly
Yeah.
wonky.
Which is, there's a fascinating thing about how at least some of the larger snakes will like you imagine if you eat an antelope, how do you digest all those bones? Do you know this about their digestive physiology, where their organs all like double, triple in size, and they wind up producing, essentially just loads more of the digestive hormones they need, and that really helps them ramp up their digestion so they can process the entire food item they've taken.
It's kind of like if you knew you weren't going to eat for the next 2 months and you decided you were going to really shrink down the size of your stomach and your liver and all this stuff so that it wasn't taking up space and weighing you down. And then you ate something and your body was just like, oh my God, we got to make a stomach. Like we got to really build this stuff back up really rapidly. Yeah. It's pretty wonky.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of closes things up.
I think that's going to wrap it up today.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for submitting all of your questions. It was a lot of fun answering them today. Let me do that again. Thank you very much for submitting your questions. I certainly had a lot of fun answering them today.
I had a great time. Great questions. Thank you so much.
Film credits appear on screen as Jeff continues to speak.
Yeah, and we hope you enjoyed hearing more about snakes. If you like this content, please remember to click and subscribe. And we look forward to bringing you more content like this from other scientists at the Natural History Museum. And I guess on behalf of both of us, thanks, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.